John Wick 3 is an action masterpiece, but not a narrative one. Okay, let me start with the good. The action in this movie is super well choreographed and non-stop, as you would expect. We're talking Mad Max Fury Road levels of intensity here, and while the first two movies had fairly long breaks of world building and setup between each fight scene, John Wick 3 has bad guys just springing out of nowhere, forcing John to find many elaborate and sometimes outlandish ways of killing them. Now this makes sense because the whole world is out to kill John Wick in this new film, but by saturating the story with so much random action, none of which really progresses the plot, you end up with a fairly empty feeling story. More on that later. There's also a whole bunch of references to classic films, like ranging from The Matrix to The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, plus a cheeky little nod to Mythbusters at one point, which I thought was pretty funny. Anyway, one very noticeable addition to this new film is that it is by far the goriest entry in the series. Just like the opening kill really sets the tone, which led to more oohs and ahs from the audience than I'd ever heard in a theater before. People don't just get shot or stabbed in this, they get straight up eviscerated in ways that I don't even want to go into because this is a spoiler-free review and some of these kills are actually worth the price of admission on their own. Now, although these moments are mostly played for a bit of dark comedy, I still found it to be a shocking departure from the usual level of violence in the series, and it was alright, but it was different, and I hate change. I hate new things. Now for the bad. Out of the whole trilogy thus far, like I said before, the story is definitely the weakest in this film. And yeah, I know, no one really goes to the John Wick films for the story, but I do. I like the stories in the first two movies, and I really appreciate the build-up to the action that the original film took its time doing. Now, it's probably worth mentioning that I went into this film expecting it to conclude the trilogy and tie everything up in a nice, neat bow. So when it got to the third act and nothing substantial had really happened, I was starting to feel cheated. Again, that's probably my fault though. What's not my fault though is that as this film went on, I started to notice more and more lazy screenplay devices and action movie cliches beginning to pop up. I was actually kind of shocked that the same creative team that managed to make the last two films so fun and subversive managed to fit so many groaners into this script. In fairness, all these cliches didn't really pick up until the third act, but the fact that these weaker elements were there to begin with kinda has me worried for the quality of writing and storytelling in the franchise moving forward. Another huge issue for me was that a lot of the action gags get repeated over and over again to the point that some of the fight scenes, despite being brilliantly choreographed, tend to actually get monotonous. Like, okay, Keanu flipping a goon over his shoulder and then executing him with a double tap is pretty badass the first time. Or Halle Berry, God, I can't believe they got her in this, having her dog bite some dude's nuts so she can pop him with a headshot is hilarious the first time. But when they start to do these same moves over and over again, it starts to get boring real fast. Of course, the original John Wick did have these same issues, but it managed to not be so distracting with them by keeping the fights fairly short. The fights in this movie go on for so long and without much change in power dynamics between combatants that, yeah, it gets boring. And with part 3 missing the killer sound design that part 2 had, you suddenly realize that there's not a lot to keep the fight scenes interesting, and as a result, you end up getting bored with fight scenes in a John Wick movie. Like, have these amazing action movies spoiled me? Do I have it too good, and I just don't realize it? Oh, also the stunt team from The Raid shows up, and as expected, they're so ridiculously good at what they do, they kind of make Keanu Reeves look like he's a 12-year-old trying to get his yellow belt in karate. That was cool. Anyway, I hope the next installment brings back some of the absent characters I liked from the second movie. I'll probably be there on day 1 to see it, and I'm giving John Wick Chapter 3 Parabellum, a Star Wars story, a 7 out of 10. Bye!